everybody. Hello to all my subscribers and fans and followers. Many thanks for this great resonance on my HRM YouTube channel. I'm really happy about this. So I got many messages asking for a special session about performance appraisal, and in the last few weeks I have prepared something really special for you. So to all the traditionally thinking HR professionals, please stay calm, relax, sit down. That's going to be really special. To all of you, enjoy. So here we go. Performance appraisal. My experience with performance appraisal was as an employee, as a victim, so to speak, as a manager, as HR. So I had the chance to implement performance appraisal in a large-scale organization. I dealt with performance appraisal as a consultant, and I dealt with performance appraisal as, let's say, a scientist or a teacher. And in the last 15 years, when I had to do with this thing, I always felt that there is something wrong with it. Yeah? And also, when I ask students, as I asked you already in the class, MBA students, from a scale from, I find performance appraisal, German Mitarbeitergespräch, totally ridiculous, stupid, silly, a pain in the ass, to absolutely useful, necessary, you can't manage an organization without it, the response is really spread. So there are people saying this and there are people saying that. And probably, since you all know that I'm an HR professor, you might be, you hold yourself back. If I would be an accounting professor, some more people would say it's ridiculous, maybe. So I don't know. I hardly find any concept in HR where you have such a different perspective on it. Similar topics are employee survey, yeah, things like this. So in this session, I would like to clarify some things. I would like to bring some structure into this and explain some things and give an outlook and how to use performance appraisal, whether it works or not, and how we're gonna deal with this topic in the future. So I don't think that I need to explain in more detail what performance appraisal is. It's amazingly simple. One time in a year, manager and employee sit together and talk about the future, the objectives, and about the past. Review of performance and competencies, the future, performance objectives, development objectives. You do this once in a year, in January, let's say. Maybe you have a mid-year review, and you do this annually. Okay? That's it. Simple. You make notes, put it into a system via iPad, or I don't know. To make things clear here, I consider the traditional performance appraisal as something that happens between the supervisor and an employee, right? And the result are always decisions and judgments. Yeah, it's not about having a small talk. So how are you doing? Everything's fine. It's about really come up with decisions about the future, maybe judgments about the past. Yeah, decisions and judgments. That are the outcomes. And we consider performance appraisal in most organizations as a very common approach. We do the same thing in different functions on different levels, more or less. So it's we cover the entire organization, and in most cases the supervisor is in the leading position. Right? I can rarely imagine an organization where the employees say, "Hey, Mr. Manager, it's January. I would like to invite you in my office to do a talk." It's vice versa, right? In most organizations. Very important. Performance appraisal is not a meeting. Performance appraisal is not a dialogue. Performance appraisal, Mitarbeitergespräch, is a system. It's a system. Why is it a system? As I will show you in a minute, there are a lot of interfaces to other HR processes, like compensation benefits, development, learning, talent management, and so on. And whenever we have a system in an organization, there must be a system owner. And in that case, it's probably HR or a HR kind of instance in the organization. I would say without HR, there is no performance appraisal, right? So let's leave it to this. So I said this, it's a system. We use judgments and decisions for compensation when it comes to variable pay for performance. We identify potential, maybe this information leads into a kind of talent management process. Learning, we identify learning gaps, development needs that leads to learning. Maybe with the objectives, they are all embedded in a kind of overall balanced scorecard, employee retention, outplacement, and so on. So it's a system. Now, let's come to the fundamental point here. It's also my kind of agenda for today. What I find in most organizations is the following story. There is, in most cases, an HR department, HR head, and they decide upon implementing that kind of tool. Yeah? Let's implement Mitarbeitergespräch, let's implement performance appraisal. Then they think about how to do it. Yeah, what's the design? What is in the form? Who should do what? When do we do this? This is the design, the how we do it. Then what happens in most organizations is that the tool clashes with the internal conditions. With culture, leadership, the way the people work. I'll talk about the condition later. So and now HR is getting nervous, it's kind of resistance, the people don't like it so much, some like it. So HR is in a kind of mess, and then we think about, okay, why do we do this? Right? And then at the end we think about results. I had a very typical conversation a few days ago with an HR director. He told me, Professor Dorst, I need a system to support my performance appraisal system. I asked him, we need a system. Why do you do performance appraisal? Well, because in our performance appraisal, the employees get feedback. Why do they need feedback? Yes, people need feedback to learn. That's fine. So why do you need a system? We need a system in HR to make reports. Why do you need reports? It's not me who requires the report, it's the executive board. Why does the executive board need these reports? They simply need it. They request it. That was the end of the conversation. You know, that's exactly the same story in many organizations. It's a mixture of different purposes, of who is the customer of this, why do we do this, for whom, what are the results, and we mix it all up, right? So if you do it right, you start with the results. You first think, what do I want to achieve with that? Why do I need this? Once you have agreed on the results, on the intended results, and I will talk about potential results in a minute, you must think about the conditions. How does our organization look like? How is leadership in our organization? How do the people work? What is the nature of work? And once we have understood the conditions in the organization, then we can think of whether performance appraisal is the right tool, or whether there are other tools who are better able to meet the intended results, right? And then at the end we think about the design. So, and that's exactly my agenda. What are typical results? A wide range. Right? So in some organizations I feel that some HR directors really want to solve the world hunger with performance appraisal, because performance appraisal helps us with everything. Yeah, it helps us to reward high performers. It helps us to treat low performers. It helps us to identify potential. It helps us to track suitability of our employees. We can offer perspectives in the performance appraisal. We learn through feedback. We develop the employees. We manage by objectives. We motivate through objectives. We retain employees. And this is by far not complete. This is what we find in many organizations. At least this is what I get when I ask HR people, why do you do this, right? So an important point here is now, it's not only what do we want to achieve with this? But the point is also, who is the customer of this? Who needs this? Who requires this? And when we have a closer look on this, I find 4 different patterns in different organizations. And this is really relevant for the rest of this session. Pattern number 1. There is an executive board saying, we want to improve our leadership in our organization. Then the executive board talks to HR, and HR then talks to the managers, and the managers do something with the employees. So the executive board is the customer. They want this. Right? And HR translates this into reality. What I often find is a totally different story. There is a new HR director coming on board from a different organization, and the HR director wants to implement performance appraisal because he loves it, or he understands it, or has read a book about it. So he wants to implement performance appraisal. So he talks to the executive board. Hey, let's do this. Feedback is good. Objective setting is good. Let's do it structured and write things down and put it in the system. That's great, yeah? And the executive board, as naive as they can be, say, yes, that cannot be wrong. Okay? So with the executive board in there, supported by the executive board, they attack the managers. Say, you have to do this annual talk with your people, and here's the form. It's supported by the executive board. And then you know how things go on. Different story. There are managers saying, well, you know, we are all engineers, so we have never learned how to lead people. We are really we are strong in technology, but we struggle in leading people. So we need something. Yeah. So the managers are the customers. They want something. And then maybe they talk to the executive board saying, well, you know, we have learned also through our last employee survey that we are doing a bad job. So let's give us support for this. So the executive board talk to HR, say, do something for the managers. That sounds better, right? Yeah. Or the employees say something like, we need more structured feedback. We need more structure in how we are led. We want to understand where we are, where we stand, and then they talk to the managers, and the managers say, hey, our people expect something, yeah. And then they talk to the executive board, and the executive board says, HR, do something for our people. The important thing here is that we have totally different customers. To give you a very concrete example, if you do something like a 360-degree feedback, you know all what that is. A 360-degree feedback, somebody gets feedback from different angles. Who gets the report? The executive board. HR, because it makes their life easier. The manager, the employee. Totally different practices, depending on who requests something like this, right? So that's really crucial. And if you do something what the people explicitly not request, performance appraisal can become very toxic. Yeah, and my only way to explain this is to give you a short story. That sometimes helps. It's the story of the man who gives flowers to his wife. There is a man who every weekend gives flowers to his wife because he loves his wife. And his wife is thankful and he loves her husband, and that's all fine, right? Now, cut. In the German government in Berlin, they are worried about the growing number of divorces. Too many couples in Germany get divorced. So they get committed for a law. And the law says every husband in Germany has to give flowers to his wife every weekend. Now it becomes a law. What happens to the man? What happens to the man? What do you think?
He will be frustrated every time he buys the flowers.
He will be frustrated. Ultimately, he will stop giving flowers to his wife and will do something else. Isn't that weird? I mean, through making something mandatory, you stop the related behavior. So, you have managers in your organization who do a great job, the natural-born managers, who talk to their people. Not only every year, but every week, every day. And now they have to talk. And the people that they know that the manager talks, maybe because he has to talk. And now this becomes a different story. From a psychological point of view, we all start with an intrinsically motivated behavior. You do something as a manager because you want to do it. Now it comes the policy given by HR. Yeah? Now you show the same behavior. What happens now, psychologically spoken, is that your people will think that you do it because you have to do it. Now, if we say in psychology, we say your behavior is attributed as being extrinsic. You do it because you have to do it. And that's a different story. At the end, the behavior will not be valued anymore. So that's what I mean, that things like this can become very toxic. You can stop good leadership by implementing performance appraisal. Now, I said the crucial point here is to consider the internal conditions. And there are 3 layers I'm going to talk about. It's about the relation between the employee and their organization. It's the relation between the employee to their supervisor and the relation between the employee to their work. Yeah? And let's have a look at these different things. And I would like to start with work. So what we know is that work is not the same everywhere. Yeah? And we can classify different jobs or different tasks, however you name it, in 3 dimensions. The dimension of 1 is the certainty of results. Do you really know the outcomes from the beginning? Yeah? You might say, yes, of course. Now, hey, in many areas, research development, software development, in some knowledge-intensive areas, you don't know about the results. So really, you have a vision maybe, but not exact results. And in some cases, you don't even know how to get there. You simply start. You use technologies like Scrum, yeah, rather than the original project management techniques. And the scope might be different, yeah. For some tasks, the scope is huge. Then we talk about projects. For some other tasks, the scope is very limited. So let's look at 2 extreme cases. Here, this is a job A, very limited. You do it 100 times in a day. It's clearly described. And you know exactly the outcomes. There are documents, and the employee exactly knows what to do every single day. While here, you work on a project, it's huge. You don't know how to get there. It's more like an adventure. You don't know the result, really. You don't know how to get. That's really vague. Now, question to you. In which field do objective setting make sense? Where can you set objectives? Yeah? Here? I mean, I hear many managers saying, well, what should I talk to my cashier in the discounter? Cashier? Hey, this employee simply should do his fucking job. I don't want to sit every year talking about objectives. Do what you are told to do. Full stop. Yeah? This is simple. Yeah? Like here, when I worked at SAP, I met so many developers, of course, saying, how can I set an objective for the upcoming 12 months when I don't even know what I do next month? Yeah? Things are so uncertain. So, hey, come on. So, I would say objective setting only makes sense somewhere in the middle. Middle level agility. In other areas, I would doubt about it. And the second thing is that tasks are interrelated. You know this. I mean, a very example which is seen as very perfect related to performance appraisal and objective setting is always sales. Yeah, sales. Your objective is to generate 500,000 euro in the upcoming years. In the upcoming year, clear. Bah. I think this is not a perfect example. Why? Because as sales representative, your success depends on the market situation, depends on marketing, depends on the quality of the products, depends on thousands of things. So it's simply not fair to judge a sales representative only based on its own outcomes. That's not fair, right? If a sales representative is successful, then not because of the sales representative only, but because of the system. Yeah? Okay? So things are related somehow. Yeah? It's very complicated, and there are very simple tools to understand this kind of dynamic by using the sensitivity analysis of Frederick Fester, who says there are tasks which have a strong reaction, which react very strongly on other tasks. So these tasks depend on other tasks very much. And there are tasks which have a strong influence on other tasks. If you have both, then it's a critical task. It depends on other tasks, and it has influence on other tasks, while these tasks here, they are buffered somehow, right? So again, objective setting can become very toxic, especially with the critical ones, because what you do in objective setting is you do not agree on the obvious values. Let's think about the banking industry. I mean, you focus on revenue and you forget about fundamental values. There is no banker who has the objective in his objective setting saying, don't lie to the customer. These are the obvious. But if you focus too much on one single objective, you might forget about the others. And that can turn a system upside down. So again, objective setting can be very toxic, right? So let's talk about supervision. Let's talk about supervisor. This is the old style of supervisor, the old style of manager. He knows a lot, general knowledge, much expertise, and the employees are like him or her, but just a little bit smaller. General knowledge, expertise. We find more and more areas, knowledge-intensive areas, where it's totally different, where the manager looks like this. Of course, he has some experience, broad experience. There is a remaining part, expertise from his career. And how do the employees look like? Like this. And that's because of complexity. The idea that a manager knows everything and is the champion on everything and can make the right decision on everything, that's over. Right? That's simply over. Yeah, in many cases. Yeah. Depends on the culture, depends on the kind of work. Absolutely. I say there are more and more areas where this applies. So that means that every single employee has more knowledge about his specific area than the manager. Now the question is, how can a manager evaluate the performance of an employee when the employee knows more about his task than the manager? And we also know that these kind of experts don't learn from the manager, they learn from each other, right? So things change here. And when we put this in a kind of structure, I see 4 different roles of a supervisor. And you can reflect on this. What is your dominant role? The first role is the one of the boss. That's the old style of leadership. Leadership in that sense means, how can I as a boss make my people do what I want them to do? Yeah? That's leadership. What can I make my people do what I want them to do? Motivation, objectives, control. We find more and more other roles, like the partner role. You are on the same level, more or less. Yeah, it feels like you work on the same level. But hey, there's one who is the boss, but you don't feel it. Yeah, he's part of the team, and you jointly find solutions. For instance, in our faculty, we have a dean, but the dean is not my boss. Our dean would not tell me, Armin, can you copy that book? He's our manager, of course, a kind of manager. He has his leader role, but he's not my boss, right? Or think about the Rolling Stones, the Stones. Mick Jagger was the lead of the band. Can you imagine that Mick Jagger makes a performance appraisal with Keith Richard, saying, hey, Keith Richard, it's January, we have to do the performance appraisal. Here's the form, so I think you met expectations. Let's make the mark here. No, hey, come on, it's ridiculous. That doesn't work. Yeah? Some act like a coach. I mean, very simple example. There's an employee saying, I have a problem. What should I do? Ask the boss. The partner would say, okay, so good to know. Let's sit together and find a joint solution. The coach would say, okay, did you understand the problem? What is the problem? What is your solution? Right? And these are the enablers. When we stick to Rolling Stones, they really had a manager. Yeah, he died 2 days ago, by the way. Prince Ferdinand Löwenstein. Yeah, the original name is much longer. He was the manager, but he did never performance appraisal with the Stones. Yeah, he just took care that the Stones were creative and they become famous. That was his job. He didn't understand anything about music. In fact, he didn't like the music of the Rolling Stones, right? So whenever we say the role of a manager is to enable people that they can do a good job, then we talk about this kind of role, right? So this is truly important here. Now, here comes my personal hero into play. This is my Bible, my management Bible. The Human Side of Enterprise, written in 1960. Yeah? And he also dealt with performance appraisal more than 50 years ago. And here he is. Yeah? And this is an original quote from the book. He says, the role of a judge and the role of a counselor are incompatible. What does that mean? What is to be a judge? I mean, the Stones. Did Mick Jagger give feedback to Keith Richard? Gave Keith Richard feedback to Mick Jagger? Of course. Every second, every minute when they play together, they give constant feedback, of course. But what makes a judgment a judgment? A judgment is a judgment when you write it down and you give it to somebody else, to HR. Then a feedback turns into a judgment. And the one who is doing that becomes a judge. So what we find in practice is that we have managers who manage like partners, the same eye level. Now comes HR and turns the partner into a judge. Yeah, and I've experienced that personally. I work with my people always on the same eye level, and there was this January where I have to sit together with people say, hey Bernd, we have to do this performance appraisal, I have to make a mark here. Okay, let's do it. Yeah, because I don't want to act like a judge while I want to be a coach or a partner. These two roles are not compatible, right? So, and there companies really have to be careful. And performance appraisal as such might not be compatible to certain leadership roles, right? And what happens psychologically spoken? It's very simple. If you as a manager have to make a judgment about one of your employees, let's say about teamwork, yeah, the first thing is you think, do I have a judgment available or maybe no? So I have to understand, what do I mean with teamwork? Then you try to remember, Was this teamwork? How did he or she behave? What comes to my mind? And then you come to a kind of initial judgment. Well, I think it's quite bad. And then you think, okay, but when I tell this to her or him, I should not say this. So you might make some adjustments, so that at the end everything is fine. That very much applies when you are on a partner relation, because the partner relation is built on trust, while the boss-employee relation is built on power. A boss has no problem to say, you're worse. But on a partner relation, you play around. Yeah, you have to fill this form. Okay, that's a true conflict. Now let's look at the organizational level. There are 3 dimensions which come into play. Autonomy, that is, how much self-control do the people have? Do they work? Do they do things because they have to? Do they do their task, their job, in a way as they are told to do? Or do they define their job by themselves? Yeah? That's the level of self-regulation, self-control, autonomy. Some people work alone, separated, individually. Some work in teams or in linked teams, in networks, right? For some people, it's that the people, the employee, depend on the organization, that they are happy that they got this job, while in other circumstances, the organization depends on the employee. They are happy that they have this employee on board. That's what I mean, professional independence. Yeah? If professional independence is high, I mean, you can change the organization at any time. If independence is low, you better take care that you don't lose your job, right? So now let's look at 2 different cases. This is case number 1A. This is an employee who does what he or she is told to do, less autonomy, very clearly directed, job description, process description. This employee is happy that he or she got this job, has not so many options out there or inside. And this employee works alone. Yeah? So you have a person in mind, right? And this is a different person, B. That's a person who can change the career at any time. They get calls every month. They get contacts via LinkedIn or Xing. This person works more in teams than alone. And this employee has much influence. They really are very creative, partly autonomous, shapes his or her own working environment, the things how he or she is doing the job. So the question is, how does performance appraisal look like here? How does it look like here? If professional independence is low, you can be very honest with your performance appraisal, even though it's in a very negative feedback. You did a bad job. You know that this employee will stay in your organization. Now the other case, you have, let's say, Bernd, and you're totally happy that Bernd is on board. He's an electrical engineer, and you don't find electrical engineers anymore out there. So even though Bernd is a complete idiot, you would say, Bernd, I love you. Yeah? So you would not dare to tell him. So, I mean, this circumstance has much influence how things work in practice. You would never make an individual performance appraisal, individual objective setting when people work in teams. That does not fit. Yeah? And also, you would not give objectives when people are self-controlled. Yeah? You would rather talk about objectives. You would rather come to a joint agreement. So the way how objectives emerge, how they are defined, is totally different here than here. Okay, so again, it's the nature of work, it's the relationship to organization, and it's the way supervision is done. And here I have two extreme worlds. I put it simple and say, okay, now let's have two extremes. I name one hierarchy where agility is low, dynamic is low, supervisor role is the boss, autonomy is low, social collaboration is not there, it's individual work, professional independence is low. While here we have a world of agility, high dynamic, connection of tasks. Yeah? The dominant role of managers is partner coach. Autonomy is very high, you act more bottom-up way. Social collaboration is in a way that there are linked teams, networks, and professional independence is high. So let's put it these extremes. Sometimes extremes help to sort things out, right? And now let's have a look how traditional performance appraisal work in these two different worlds. And I made a very rough estimation. 5 stars means it perfectly works. 1 star means it does not work at all. So this is a rough estimation based on my analysis. It's not empirically based. So I will go through some of these things, but overall, I would say that performance appraisal did not work really well, even in a hierarchical world. But it better works in a hierarchical world than in an agile world. In an agile world, you are lost with a traditional kind of performance appraisal, really. So this is a kind of summary, and I mean, would you buy this product on Amazon? We can go into every point now, and every point now is a doctoral thesis as such, right? In the first half hour of my session, I brought up some ideas why some things rarely work in an agile world and hardly works in a hierarchical world, right? And I would like to pick out some of these. For instance, reward high performance. That works well in a hierarchical world where things are clearly described. You can really, on an annual basis, say, you did a good job, you did a bad job. Right? Things are static, things are described. As a manager, you have the power to act this way. Right? In an agile world, you should work in teams. A top performer is only a top performer when the team agrees to this. So the traditional top-down thing does not work here. I will talk about treat low performance in a minute, but identify potentials. In many organizations, I find ways that the manager has to indicate in the performance appraisal whether the employee has the potential to move into a top role. This never did really work, because the immediate supervisor makes a judgment about something that he never experienced. That never really did work, and works less in an agile world. Track suitability. I mean, in the old world, you had huge load of criteria where you had to judge your employees. How are the communication skills, teamwork skills, customer orientations, thinking strategic, yeah, 20. I saw an organization who had 150 criteria where the manager had to scale every employee, 150 criteria. That might work to a certain extent in a very static world. But in a world of complexity and uncertainty and constant change, that cannot work, right? So let's have a look how things must change when we look into the future, when we look in an agile world. So in the hierarchical world, what did we do? Traditional performance appraisal. We did all at once. There was this one meeting in January, and we looked at everything to achieve results on everything. In an agile world, we will be much more focused, separated. To give you an example, very concrete example. This is what many organizations do. They say, okay, we have a distribution in our organization with regards to performance. We have some C players, we have many B players, and we have some A players. And the curve goes like this. If you don't hire the people randomly, you have a curve like this. Is there any reason to look at the C players and at the A players all at once, at the same point of time? The answer is clearly no, and you should not. I mean, think about football. Yeah? First yellow card, second yellow card, gone. Yeah? You get dramatically hurt, your performance breaks down, leave the playing field. In football, you would not wait until it's January or the end of the game saying, hey, that was worse. When it comes to C players, when it comes to low performance, you should act instantly. Yeah? So being sick is not the opposite of being healthy. If you are sick, you have to act and not wait until January. And then different actions happen. So that's a different story. Even we talk about the same continuum. This is a different story with different actions on different point of times than identifying the A players one time single. So we're gonna separate these things. That's what I mean with the first thing. Then the second point, in the past in performance appraisal, we did things individually. Every manager talked to their employee individually, right? The old traditional way. As it was a one-on-one meeting. In the future, we do things social. That means I meet more and more organizations who do this performance appraisal or kind of performance appraisal in a team setting. Yeah? And every employee has his own pin board, and every employee can make notes about every other employee on the pin board, and they jointly talk about it. Right? I once had a conversation with a CEO who said, I asked him, so in the last year I asked every CEO, what do you think about performance appraisal? And there was one saying, it's totally important. Performance appraisal is very important because if you take performance seriously, you have to have a performance review. I say yes, but why do you hide this discussion into this one-time event somewhere hidden in the manager's office? If you take performance seriously, talk about it in the team, right? That's a different story, different technique. And things get social here. I observe this more and more, right? Also, when it comes to learning, things become social. Yeah? This is the old textbook style of learning and development, learning and training. Individual learning, managers, trainers are the trainers, they are the teachers. It's very often off the job, it's really planned, formal, ordered, you have to do this. Long cycle, every year we think about which training is required. You come very much from the requirements, the job-related requirements. You have to become better in Excel. You are not good enough in Excel, so here's the Excel course. And then after the course, after the job, we hope for a kind of learning transfer, that the learning is transferred into practice. While in an agile world, it's this plus this, right? It's that we much more learn socially in team settings, joint settings, yeah? As we do in the MBA, by the way. Yeah? You learn from and with others, on the job, on demand. You learn when you need to learn it. Yeah? It's much more informal learning. It's much more employee-driven. I learn something because I think I need to learn it in a short cycle. And the most driver is not that you don't fit to requirements. The most important driver is your curiosity and the feeling of uncertainty. Yeah? And very important in an agile world, work is equal learning. Yeah? Learning means to become better in something. We didn't have a solution, now we have a solution. What did you do? You learned. Yeah? In science, we didn't have any insights on this, now we have insights. That's your work to come from here to there. What did you do? You learned. It's not that you leave the organization, learn something, and come back. Yeah? Working means learning. And that's really social. Yeah? It's customer employee driven. So, okay, employee driven. I mean, in very hierarchical worlds, talent identification works like this. There's the employee, and there's the supervisor. The supervisor says, "Hey, Bernd, you are good. Yeah? I'd like to nominate you for the talent pool. Yeah? For this target position, something above, right? And ultimately, there are some deciders and top management who make a decision whether Bernd should become part of the talent pool. The problem is that the supervisor has no clue about this position because he is level below. How should he know? Yeah. And also the supervisor becomes the bottleneck for the employee. If the supervisor does not understand that you are a hero, you're gone, right? So in an agile world, employees take over responsibility. And as an employee, I don't need the supervisor at all. I simply talk to somebody, what we name in more and more organization, a kind of talent manager, a former CEO, maybe a former executive board member. I consider myself being a talent. We have a conversation, coaching, and then he has close link to the deciders. And then if the deciders agrees, then the employee becomes part of the talent pool for some target position. Totally different process, driven by the employee without any responsibilities for the supervisor. Maybe the employee talks with the supervisor later on, that's right, of course. But he has no crucial role on this, right? Or let's talk about here feedback. To put it very extreme now, to put it really extreme, this is how it works in hierarchical world. Here is the employee. He's doing something. And the sum of the work in the department makes up the product. Right? And the product went to the client. And then the client gives feedback, but not to him or her, but to management. Yeah? And then it goes down the hierarchy. So there is another professor, Professor Kruse, who said hierarchies are there to avoid linkage, to avoid networks, and to avoid customer contact. That's a very extreme point of view, but that's what this picture means. You separate the employee from the customer. Right? That's fine for many areas, no doubt about it. We don't want every employee to have in touch with the client. Some business, that's fine, yeah. But in an agile world, new product development, in very innovative worlds, things work different. And now just think about being an employee, having an idea. What do? You have an idea. You were with a customer, you had a project with a customer, you come back to your office and I have a strong idea. What do? You will act differently in a hierarchical world than in the agile world. In a hierarchical world, you have this idea, you talk to your manager saying, well, I have an idea. The manager talks to the next manager, and then they track, they put the idea to this unit where they think this unit is in charge of this idea. What happens to your idea? Nothing. Yeah, mostly nothing. There's this quote: if you want to kill an idea, bring it into a meeting. Yeah. Or to a committee, then it's get ultimately killed. So we know from very innovative organizations that if you have an idea, do it the other way. Talk to some potential supporters in the organization informally. Yeah. Have coffee breaks together. I have an idea. What do you think? And bring it to a level of maturity without needing any resources. Yeah? Once you have a certain level of maturity, once you have a certain amount of supporters, then you might transport it to the next level. But the ultimate rule is act in the underground as long as possible. Right? And once you need resources from some enablers inside the organization, which in many cases are people in management, You work in the teams on your idea in direct customer contact. This is what you find in agile organization. Immediate contact with the customer, internally supported with resources and everything. So, objective setting, performance appraisal works totally different here. You don't want to get a feedback from your manager, you want a feedback from the customer. Yeah? And that's a different story. Okay? And that also applies inside teams. When we zoom into these different teams, also say they give feedback in direct touch, as I already have mentioned. So, we also find that things become more qualitative and open. I find more and more organizations who get rid of this very well-structured 100 criteria on very predefined scale, but just having very open questions. Okay, Bernd, let's talk about what is one thing where you want to get better next year. Let's write it on this piece of paper and keep it. And put it out in a year. We don't put it to HR or so. You write it on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope. If you want, I can take it for security reasons. Yeah. So also owned by the employee. I find more and more organizations say we don't want HR that they get all this information. Why the hell should they get these? Yeah. Let's leave these things to the people who are in charge of their development and their objective and their performance. And these are the employees. Yeah. Okay. So to sum it up, number one, it's a system. Right? As I told you, it's not a meeting, it's not a one-time incident, it's a system when we talk about performance appraisal. And as I first think of the results and not of the tool. Thinking of the tool is HR thinking. Thinking of results, it's more appropriate. And be clear about who is the customer. For whom do you do this? And mixed messages don't help there. The people aren't dumb. Yeah. Then consider internal conditions. And I talked about 3 different layers: organization, supervision, and work. And I told you that even under hierarchical conditions, the classical performance appraisal did not fully work. We know this. Since years, since decades. There was also always strong criticism around performance appraisal. But in an agile environment, traditional performance appraisal does not work. Right? It's simply over here. So agility requires focused, as I told you, a social, open approaches driven by employees and customer. And finally, but I don't write it here down, is I know a lot of HR departments who are fighting for acceptance. I told them, as long as you do silly things, you never get the acceptance. So let's have a different perspective on this. So many thanks for your attention. So.